The cell smelled of old straw, rot, and the sea. The stones sweated in the dark, weeping slow tears down the walls, and Eddard Stark sat with his back against it, chains heavy around his wrists and ankles, head bowed as if in prayer. There was no light save the feeble glow of the lantern set outside the bars, and the man who watched him with pale eyes and folded hands seemed less a man than a robed spider come to whisper in the dark. "You will die," Varys had told him softly moments before, as if discussing the weather, "and your daughters will be left to the mercies of Queen Cersei and King Joffrey. You know what mercies they have." Ned's fingers tightened around the memory of a sword hilt that was not there. Ice was gone, his honor was gone, his good name broken and dragged through the mud before half the realm. What remained was the weight of his daughters' faces in his mind, Sansa's tear-streaked cheeks, Arya's stubborn chin and fierce eyes. "You ask me to confess to lies," Ned said, his voice rough from thirst. "You ask me to spout treason before the world." "I ask you to live," Varys replied, "to take the black, to go where your honor can still mean something. At the Wall, no one will care if King Joffrey calls you traitor. They will care that you can stand and fight and command. The dead are stirring, Lord Stark. The Night's Watch needs every sword." The words should have stung, but instead they slid into a hollow space inside him where something else had already died. He thought of Benjen riding north and never returning. He thought of the strange tales that had filtered south in drunken mutters and half-remembered letters. Blue-eyed corpses, pale walkers in the snow, wildlings fleeing a terror they could not name. "If I confess?" Ned asked, forcing the question past the iron taste in his mouth. "Cersei will let my daughters live? She will send me to the Wall." Varys inclined his head. "The Queen has agreed. The boy king has been persuaded. The city will see a spectacle of contrition and royal mercy, and you will ride north with the next party of Black brothers." Mercy. The word sat ill upon his tongue, yet he could not spit it out. He saw Robb's face, the last time in Winterfell's yard, a boy trying to stand like a man. He saw Bran falling, Bran broken, Bran silent. He saw Sansa clutching a doll, Arya's small hands red with blood from some new cut. They were all here or in the wolf's jaws of this city, save the ones who were in the cold ground. "Honor is in keeping them safe," Varys murmured as if reading his thoughts. "You were willing to die for that once. Now you must be willing to live." It was not the way Ned Stark would have chosen, but choices were for men who still held swords and clean names. He was something else now, something smaller, but not yet nothing. He lifted his head, and in the dim light his gray eyes were clear. "I will say the words," he said. "For my girls, for the North, I will say what they want." Varys bowed his bald head. "Then perhaps the gods are not entirely deaf." Sunlight stabbed at his eyes when they dragged him up from the dark. Ned blinked against it, the world swimming in bright shapes and noise until it resolved into stone steps, white cloaks, the gold of the city watch, and a sea of faces craning for a better look. The roar of the crowd was a living thing, hungry and hot. He stumbled when they pushed him forward. Chains rattled, bit into his flesh, and his knees struck stone. The heat of it seeped through his torn breeches. Across the steps, raised above him like a cruel parody of divine judgment, the royal party waited. Cersei's gown shimmered green and gold, high-necked, her face a mask of composed disdain. Joffrey stood in crimson and black, crown perched crookedly atop his golden curls, eyes bright with a malice that needed no wine to feed it. Beside them, Sansa, his little girl in a sky-blue gown, was pale as milk, lips moving soundlessly as she stared at him. Arya was nowhere to be seen. He prayed she had found some hole to crawl into, some alleyway to vanish down. He had trusted Yoren with her, a poor, desperate trust, but it was all he had left. "Lord Eddard Stark," Grand Maester Pycelle wheezed, voice booming with borrowed authority. "Formerly Hand of the King, formerly Lord of Winterfell, stands accused of high treason against the crown." The words washed over him. Ned felt the weight of eyes and hate and curiosity, the tightening in his chest when he looked at Sansa, at how she shook, at how she seemed to be pleading. He remembered the lines of the script Varys had given him, the phrases crafted to soothe pride and inflame pity. When they thrust the parchment into his hands, he did not read it. His eyes were too blurred. Instead, he spoke from the hollow place in his chest. "I betrayed the faith placed in me," he began, voice cracking. "I plotted with the king's enemies. I sought to deny King Joffrey his rightful throne. Each lie was a stone he swallowed, yet he made himself chew. Let no man mistake. I am a traitor, and unworthy of mercy." A hush fell. The city leaned closer. He cast his gaze down, feeling the weight of each untruth settle on his shoulders like another chain. If this is what it takes, he told himself, if this is the price of their lives, I will wear it to my grave. He forced himself to look up at Joffrey. "I beg the king's mercy," he said. For a heartbeat, he saw something flicker in Cersei's eyes. Tension, calculation, fear. She stepped closer to the boy king, her lips moving at his ear. Sansa was sobbing openly now, hands pressed together as if in prayer to the same gods who had watched her father dragged through the streets. Joffrey listened, then pushed Cersei's arm away with a sharp jerk. The gesture was petulant, yet there was something in it that made Ned's gut twist. "Let it be known," Joffrey said, his voice high, cutting across the square, "that this man has confessed to his crimes." He paused, savoring the silence. "My lady mother and my betrothed have begged for mercy." Cersei's jaw tightened. Pycelle leaned forward. The crowd held its breath. "And so," Joffrey cried, spreading his hands, "in my youth and my grace, I shall not have his head struck from his shoulders today." The roar began as a murmur of surprise, swelling as the words sank in. Ned's heart stuttered, unbelieving. Instead, Joffrey went on. "Eddard Stark is stripped of all lands and titles. He is to don the black and take the vows of the Night's Watch, to live out his days on that cold wall at the end of the world, as befits a traitor who has begged for mercy." Sansa collapsed to her knees with a sob of relief. Somewhere below, a man shouted that it was too soft an end, and another cursed him down. Ned barely heard them. The air seemed suddenly thin, the light too bright. Alive, he thought, dizzy. "They mean to let me live." Ser Island lowered his greatsword. Cersei's face was tight as a drawn bowstring, but she nodded once, playing her part. The small council looked at one another, measuring the currents they had helped set loose. The crowd screamed for blood, then for exile, then for blood again. A wild, confused beast denied its favorite meat. Ned lowered his head, hiding the tears that stung his eyes. "Let them call me coward," he thought. "Let them name me traitor. I will wear the black. I will never again see Winterfell snow, but my girls will live." He clung to that as they took him away. The King's Road ran like a scar through the heart of the realm, and Ned watched it pass in jolts and shudders from the cage of his wagon. His wrists were chained to an iron ring, his ankles fettered, but the manacles mattered less than the way men looked at him as they passed. Some spat. Some made the sign of the seven as if to ward off a curse. One woman, plump and red-faced, clutched her child to her skirts and hissed "traitor" as the wagons rolled by. Ned had no comfort to offer her, no protest to make. Once he might have said that he had done his duty as best he knew it, that honor was a hard road with no good endings, but the words sat like ashes on his tongue now. Beside the wagon, brothers of the Night's Watch rode in black cloaks, their faces hidden beneath hoods. Among them he recognized Yoren by his straw-yellow hair and the bundle of rags and boys he shepherded along like so many stray pups. The man had given him a brief, sharp nod when they first left the city, and once, in the dead of night when the campfires were low and the Lannister guards snored, he had shuffled close enough to murmur, "The little one's away. Your girl. I saw her off with my lot. She's safe as any can be. Arya." Ned had gripped the bars until his knuckles whitened. "Thank you," he had said, and the words had trembled more than he liked. Now, as the days lengthened and the air chilled by slow degrees, the red of Lannister cloaks grew fewer. One by one, the gold cloaks peeled away at crossroads and posting inns, until at last only a small knot remained, more for show than threat. It was the men in black who kept the pace, their horses lean and hardy, their eyes turned always north. At night, under thin blankets, Ned listened to them talk. Around their fires they spoke of the wall, of stones taller than any tower, of winds that could flay a man, of wildlings and wights and half-remembered tales of blue-eyed demons. They spoke of Lord Commander Jeor Mormont, the old bear, who had once fought beside men like Ned in Robert's rebellion. They spoke of Jon Stark, too, though their tones grew quieter when his name was mentioned. Still no word, Ned asked the first time he heard his brother's name. The question tore itself from him before he could swallow it. One man, a rangy brother with a scar down his cheek, glanced over. "Ranger went out from Castle Black near a year ago," he said. "Never came back. First ranger he was. Your blood, they say." Ned nodded once, the motion slow. The fire popped, showering sparks. Somewhere in the dark, an owl called. "Benjen," he thought. "I sent you north without knowing what you rode into." The further north they went, the more the land changed. Golden fields gave way to scrub and stone, to wind-twisted trees and scattered farms with their doors barred early. At one small holdfast, a graybeard with a weathered face pressed a wineskin into Ned's bound hands when the guards were looking elsewhere. "You were our hand," the old man said, eyes sharp in his lined face. "You tried to keep them honest. That's more than most in King's Landing can say." "I failed," Ned answered softly. The man said, "but you failed trying to do right." "I'll drink to that." Ned did not know whether that made the weight on his shoulders lighter or heavier. He looked north, where the sky darkened and the air cut a little deeper with each breath, and felt the wall looming even before he saw it. Somewhere beyond that line of stone and ice, his brother had vanished. Somewhere beyond, old stories waited with cold hands. He wrapped his thin cloak tighter around him and bowed his head, letting the road carry him toward the life he had chosen in chains. The first sight of the wall stole his breath as surely as any blow. It rose out of the north like the end of the world, a sheer cliff of ice catching the weak autumn light and throwing it back in shades of blue and white and death. The wind that came off it was a living thing, cold and hungry, carrying with it scents Ned had not known since boyhood: pine resin, old snow, the sharp, clean tang of air that had never known a city. The wooden gate at Castle Black creaked and shuddered as the party rode through, chains rattling, men shouting. Within, the courtyard was a chaos of movement. Brothers hauling barrels, stable hands leading horses, recruits gaping in every direction. Black cloaks flapped in the wind, and smoke from the kitchens curled up into the gray sky. They brought him down from the wagon like any other criminal. Ned's joints protested as he straightened, the weight of the chains dragging at him. His breath smoked in front of his face. He smelled manure, wood smoke, the faint grease of cooked meat. It might have been Winterfell for a heartbeat, some forgotten morning in the yard, before the world had turned. "New men for the wall," the officer in charge of the escort announced, his tired voice cutting across the hubbub. "Criminals and volunteers, and one special gift from the king." The man who stepped forward to meet them was thick-shouldered, with a face like weathered oak and a great beard gone mostly to gray. He wore no crown, only heavy black furs and a gaze as steady as stone. Lord Commander Jeor Mormont had not changed so much from the days Ned remembered, riding side by side under Robert's banner. But there was something colder in him now, something carved by this place. "A gift, is it?" Mormont rumbled. "Last time a king sent us gifts, they were poachers and rapers and goat thieves. What's this one, then?" His eyes settled on Ned, and for a moment they froze there, brow furrowing. "7 hells," he breathed. "Stark." Ned could not help the way his shoulders squared. "Eddard Stark," he said. "No longer Lord of Winterfell, no longer hand. Only a man in need of a black cloak, my Lord Commander." Mormont stared at him, then snorted through his beard. "The wall is a hard place for pretty courtiers." "I was never much of a courtier," Ned replied quietly, "and I have less use than most for the trappings I've shed." The king has decreed my punishment. I'm here to serve if you'll have me." The old bear's gaze flicked to the chains, then to the men watching from the yard. The way whispers were already running like mice through the ranks. The traitor hand here at the edge of the world. It would be in every mutter before the day was done. "I heard tales," Mormont said gruffly, "of your head on a spike over the Red Keep. Seems King's Landing breeds more lies than rats." "It breeds plenty of both," Ned said. "I lived where I should have died, and men I loved died where they ought to have lived. I mean to make some use of that, if the gods are not wholly done with me." Mormont's eyes softened, just a fraction. "Benjen was a good man," he said. "A stubborn fool sometimes, but good. We still have not found him. We may never." "The cold keeps its secrets," Ned swallowed. The ache was an old one now, dulled by the months of chains and fear, but here it flared again, sharp as a fresh wound. "I would know what became of my brother," he said. "If I can help find him, that alone would be worth whatever scorn waits for me here." Mormont nodded slowly. "We'll unchain him," he told his men. "He took the king's sentence. That makes him one of us. Brothers, not prisoners." As the iron fell away from his wrists, Ned felt no lightness, only a different weight settling there. A black, silent thing, heavier than steel. The night's watch was a noose he had chosen for himself. But here, standing in the shadow of ice, with the wall towering above and the north stretching out behind, he almost felt he could breathe again. "Welcome to Castle Black," Mormont said. "You'll find no crowns here, Stark. Only cold, hard stone and the dead that walk beyond it." "Then it is as honest a place as any I have seen of late," Ned answered. He saw the boy before the boy saw him. Jon was crossing the yard with a bundle of firewood in his arms, Ghost padding at his heels, white fur a stark flare against the dark earth. There was a new set to the lad's shoulders, a way he carried himself that spoke of drills and duty, of days and nights bent under the weight of a life chosen and not given. The boy he had left on the road from Winterfell was gone. In his place walked a young man. Ned stopped where he was, the loose ends of his new black cloak stirring in the wind. He could not seem to make his feet move. He had faced kings and killers with steady eyes, but now his chest felt tight, his mouth dry. Ghost's head lifted first, the direwolf's red eyes fixed on him, and the animal froze, tail low, ears pricking. A low whine slid from its throat. Jon frowned, following the beast's gaze. "Is that?" someone muttered nearby. Conversation stuttered, then faltered into silence. Even the wind seemed to hush. Jon's eyes found him, and the world narrowed to that one piercing look. For a heartbeat, there was only confusion there. A blink as if he was seeing some ghost of Winterfell's past. Then the wood fell from his arms with a clatter. "Father!" The word tore free of Jon like something dragged out of him with hooks. Ned closed the distance in 3 long strides. His hand came up of its own accord, settling on Jon's shoulder, feeling the solid muscle there, the tremor that ran through it. "I am no lord now," he said quietly. "No hand, only Eddard. Only your father, if you still have it in you to call me that." Jon's face twisted, as if the words were a knife. "We heard you were dead," he said. "They said, the others said." His voice broke. "I saw it in my head over and over, your head on a spike. And yet I am here," Ned said. "And you are taller than I remember." His fingers brushed the worn leather of Jon's collar, an awkward, helpless gesture. "I am sorry, Jon, for leaving as I did, for the lies I let stand, for much." Jon shook his head, almost violently. "You had to go," he said, "for Robert, for the realm. I knew that." He swallowed, eyes bright. "But I did not think the gods would see fit to give you back." Ghost pressed his muzzle against Ned's hand, snuffling, as if trying to reconcile scent and memory. The wolf's fur was thick and cold, but the warmth beneath it was real. Ned scratched behind one pale ear, and something tight in his chest eased. "There is much to speak of," Ned said, "but not here." not with half the watch gawking. He glanced at the ring of faces, at the mixture of curiosity, mistrust, and something like awe. I have taken the black. The king's sentence sent me here. I am one of you now. Jon's mouth opened, closed. Then you're a brother, Ned finished. Bound as you are bound. We will serve together, if the gods are kind enough not to take me before I can be of any use. Jon's hand closed around his forearm, sudden and fierce. They won't, he said. They can't. Not now. Not when. He broke off, glancing toward the looming wall, to the dark forest beyond. Ned followed his gaze, feeling the cold creep a little deeper into his bones. Not when what? He asked. Jon's jaw clenched. There are things stirring beyond the wall, he said quietly. We've seen too much to call them stories anymore. And Benjen. I know, Ned said. I spoke to Mormont. We will speak more, you and I. But for now, he forced a faint, rough smile. Show me this place that has made a man of you, Jon, and perhaps I can still teach you some small thing of swords and stubbornness. Jon laughed, a short, startled sound, but real. He said. Come then, you've a whole new home to curse. Side by side, father and son crossed the yard as Ghost trotted after, the wall rearing above them like a promise carved in ice. Night on the wall was a different thing than night anywhere else. It was deeper, colder, more absolute. The sky above was a bowl of black glass pricked by 1,000 hard white stars, and the air was so sharp it felt as if it might cut his lungs. Ned stood at the edge of the world, hands braced on the icy stone, and looked north. The forest below was a dark sea stretching to the horizon, its waves frozen mid-crash. The moon silvered the tops of the trees and skated across the snow in long, pale streaks. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of even Ghost's keen eyes, men and things that had once been men moved through the shadows. It's beautiful, Ned said, his breath steaming in front of him. In a hard way, Jon stood beside him, cloak wrapped tight, Longclaw's pommel catching the starlight. He said, and deadly. The wind can freeze your fingers to the stones if you hold too long. Ned flexed his gloved hands, feeling the bite of cold even through the leather. Winterfell's Godswood feels almost mild by comparison. You miss it, Jon said. It wasn't quite a question. Every day, Ned's eyes remained on the dark line of the far horizon. But I think I would miss it more if I had never left. If I had lived and died there, thinking the world ended at the neck. There is something honest about knowing the true edge. Jon was silent for a moment. The wind tugged at his hair, at the edges of his cloak. Ghost lay near his feet, ears pricked, staring into the black distance as if listening to some secret only beasts could hear. When I first came here, Jon said at last, I thought the Watch would be different, noble, filled with second sons and knights who had nowhere else to go. I thought it would be a brotherhood in truth. He laughed, but there was little humor in it. It's thieves and rapers and men running from their own shadows, for the most part, and a few good men trying to hold them all together. Good men can be found in strange places, Ned said. I have seen more honor in a Sellsword's tent than in a king's hall now and again. Jon glanced at him. And now you're here. The North will think you dead or disgraced. They already do, Ned answered. Let them. Robb will be king in the North or dead trying, if the boy I knew has any say in it. My being here changes little for them. But for you, he hesitated, tasting words that had never seemed ready for his tongue. Secrets had always felt like poison to him, yet this one had sat in his chest for years, a hot coal he could neither spit out nor swallow. For me, Jon prompted. For you, Ned repeated. You chose this, whatever drove you to it. Caitlyn's coldness, my silence, the stigma of bastardy. You made the choice. That is more than I can say for myself at times. He exhaled, long and slow, letting some of the tension bleed from his shoulders. You are more of a man now than your father was, when he first marched to war. Jon blinked. My father. Ned met his gaze. For a heartbeat, the truth leapt to the edge of his tongue. Your father loved Lyanna. Your father died with her name on his lips. You are more than you think you are. But the walls had ears, and the night carried whispers, and he was not yet ready to set that fire loose. Your father, he said instead. Whoever you choose him to be, blood is one thing, choice is another. Jon digested that in silence, turning back to the dark. The dead don't care whose blood you carry, he said quietly, only whether it runs warm. Then we will keep ours warm a while longer, Ned said, and make certain it is not spilled in vain. He stood with his son under the cold, indifferent stars, and let the night seep into him, feeling the weight of the wall beneath his boots and the raw edge of the world beyond. Somewhere out there, Benjen rode in his memories, cloak streaming behind him. Somewhere out there, the stories whispered in Winterfell's kitchen were waking. He had not come here to die quietly. Not anymore. The body looked wrong even by the harsh standards of the North. Ned had seen corpses before, on battlefields, in sickbeds, hanging from Winterfell's walls. But this man's flesh seemed somehow unfinished, as if death had not been entirely decided upon. His skin had the pallor of old ice, and frost clung to his beard and lashes though they had dragged him in hours ago. Found him at the base of the wall, the ranger said, voice tight. No sign of his horse, no prints, no blood, just there. Mormont grunted, glaring at the corpse as if willing it to explain itself. He was one of ours, he said. Arthur, taken by the wildlings last year. We thought him gone. Wildlings didn't do this, another brother muttered. Look at him. Ned did. The dead man's eyes were closed, but the memory of the tales he had heard since arriving, Samwell Tarly's stammering account of a girl and her child, of something in the dark, of steel shattering like glass, made the hair on his arms stand on end. His flesh is cold as the grave, Mormont said, but not stiff. Maester Aemon, what say you? The old man stood on the other side of the table, blind eyes turned toward the body as if he could see with something beyond sight. His hands, parchment-skinned and trembling, rested on the edge of the wood. I say the world is stirring in ways it has not for a very long time, Aemon murmured. The cold grows bolder. The dead are restless. Ned met Jon's gaze across the table. The boy's eyes were wide, his mouth a grim line. Ghost stood pressed against his leg, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling constantly in his chest. Burn him, Ned said. The words came without conscious thought, rising from some deep well of old stories and older fears. Before nightfall, before the sun goes down, this body needs to be ash. A murmur ran through the gathered brothers. It was not their custom. The watch buried its dead, laid them to rest with what honor it could. But Mormont did not snap at Ned for presumption, did not remind him whose command this was. Instead, he tilted his head, studying him with those dark, thoughtful eyes. You sound like an old crone in a mountain village, Stark, he said, fearful of spirits. I listened to those old crones, Ned replied. At Winterfell, my father listened, and his father before him. Some stories are just stories. Others are warnings. North of the wall, the line between the two grows thin. The last time we burned a brother was for mutiny, one man protested. We can't just. We can and we will, Mormont cut in. He looked back at the corpse. We'll do it at dusk. Until then, keep him here. No one touches him without my leave. They scattered reluctantly. Jon lingered, gaze fixed on the dead man's face. You believe it too, he said quietly to Ned, that he might rise. Ned did not say yes. He did not have to. The weight of the stories pressed on him like the cold, a constant, inescapable presence. When I was a boy, he said instead, old Nan would tell us tales of the long night, how the dead rose and walked and the others came with their cold swords and their blue eyes. We laughed, sometimes. Sometimes we did not. Either way, we listened. Jon's jaw tightened. We'll be ready, he said. "Readiness starts with belief," Ned answered. "The South will not believe until the dead are on their doorsteps. We cannot afford that luxury." As they walked away, Ghost twisted, looking back at the corpse. His growl deepened, teeth bared in silent warning. For all his years and scars, Ned felt a prickle of fear crawl along his spine. Burn him, he thought again. Burn them all, if need be. Better ash than whatever waits on the far side of death in this cold land. The scream tore through the night like a blade. Ned was on his feet before he was fully awake, fumbling for the cloak by his cot. The barracks was a confusion of shadows and curses and men stumbling for weapons. "What was that?" someone shouted. "From the Lord Commander's rooms," another voice cried. "Up!" Ned did not wait for orders. He grabbed the nearest torch from its bracket and ran, bare feet slapping on cold stone. The corridors were a maze, but the sound, crashing, a hoarse cry, something that might have been a roar not made by any living thing, pulled him on. He burst through the door on the servant's shout, torch thrust before him. The room was cold, unnaturally so, breath smoking in thick, heavy clouds. The fire in the hearth was nearly out, embers choked in a rim of frost. The dead ranger stood in the middle of the floor, very much not dead. His eyes burned a fierce, unnatural blue. His skin, which had been merely pallid in the yard, was now a thing of gray ice, veins standing out in spiderweb patterns beneath it. Fingers that had lain limp in death were claws now, torn nails black and sharp. He moved with a jerky, horrifying quickness, flinging aside a chair as if it weighed nothing. Jeor Mormont was on the ground, back to the wall, his sword halfway drawn. Blood seeped from a line of gouges across his forearm. The Wight turned as Ned entered, that blue gaze fixing on him with a hatred that felt older than any man. It came at him in a blur of clawed hands and snapping teeth. Ned's body moved in ways it remembered from battlefields and ambushes and desperate, muddy scrambles for life. He swung the torch first, not the sword, jamming the burning brand into the creature's face. The smell hit him. A sickening reek of burning meat mingled with something colder, like snow melting on stone. The Wight shrieked, but it did not fall. It raked at him, claws catching his cloak, dragging him closer. Frost bit through the wool, through his shirt, into his very skin. "Stark!" Mormont bellowed. "Fire!" Ned shouted. "Bring fire!" The door banged open again. Jon rushed in with a lamp in one hand and Longclaw in the other, eyes wild. Behind him came other brothers, some half-armed, some clutching whatever they had. Axes, knives, another torch. Ghost darted under Jon's legs, launching himself at the Wight with a snarl. Wolf and dead man collided. Ghost's jaws closed on the Wight's arm, and bone crunched, but the thing did not seem to feel it. It swung its free hand, sending the dire wolf skidding across the floor, claws tearing bloody furrows. Rage flared white-hot in Ned's chest. He slammed the torch into the Wight's chest, this time driving it in and holding it there. The creature screamed, thrashing. Jon dropped the lamp. Oil spilled, flames leaping eagerly to meet it. Fire crawled up the Wight's legs, hungrily devouring cloth and dead flesh. "Hold it!" Jon shouted, rushing in to hack at what remained with Longclaw. Steel bit, but the cut meant less than the flames licking greedily higher, turning that icy flesh black and then to ash. In moments, it was over. The thing collapsed, limbs twitching as they burned, then lay still. The room stank of smoke and something older, fouler. Frost receded slowly from the walls, leaving damp stone weeping in its wake. Mormont hauled himself up with a grunt, face pale under his beard. "Burn them," he rasped. "All are dead. From now on, every corpse will not risk in the ground. Every man we lay to rest, we lay on a pyre." There were no objections this time. Men stared at the blackened bones, at the last sparks dying on the floor, and clutched their cloaks tighter. Ned knelt beside Ghost, running his hands over the direwolf's ribs. The animal whined softly but pushed his nose into Ned's palm, eyes still bright, still alive. You were right, Jon said, voice shaking. About the fire. I was lucky, Ned answered, though he knew that was only half true. Luck favored those who listened to old stories. He looked at the ashes, at the faint scorch marks on the floor, and thought of the kings and lords in their warm halls to the south, arguing over thrones and crowns. They do not know, he thought. They do not see. If we do not hold here, they never will. The library at Castle Black was a cramped, cluttered place, more a storeroom for half-forgotten knowledge than a true hall of learning. Scrolls lay in haphazard piles, books leaned drunkenly on sagging shelves, and dust hung in the air like a thin mist. Yet there was a small fire in the hearth, and the chair beside it was occupied by a man whose mind was keener than any blade. Maester Aemon's eyes were clouded with the white of age, but his face turned toward Ned as he entered, as if he could see by the sound of his footsteps alone. Lord Stark, Aemon said. Or should I say, brother? Eddard will do, Ned replied, lowering himself onto the bench opposite. The bruises from the wight's claws still ached, a deep, bone-deep ache that the Maester's salves could only partly soothe. Titles sit oddly on a man who has had them stripped. Some titles never leave us, Aemon murmured, even when we think we have laid them down. Ned studied him. You speak from experience. Aemon smiled faintly. Once, long ago, I was more than a maester in black. Once, the blood of kings flowed hot in my veins, and men bowed when I entered a hall. Now my veins run slow, and my eyes see nothing but shadows. Yet still I feel the weight of that blood. It is not so easily denied. Then you know what it is to walk away, Ned said quietly. To turn your back on crowns and the wars that come with them. I did not walk away, Aemon corrected gently. I was sent, or perhaps I ran. The truth is rarely so simple as we would like it. But yes, I know something of turning my face to the wall and saying, Here I will stand, and the world beyond must fend for itself. Ned glanced toward the narrow window, where only darkness showed. The world beyond will not fend for itself, he said. Not this time. We have seen a dead man walk and burn. We have heard the tales of rangers vanishing and wildlings fleeing some nameless terror. The long night, it is not as distant as we once thought. Aemon's gnarled hands folded in his lap. The first long night came when the world was young, he said. The others came with it, riding on horses of ice, their swords so cold they shattered steel. The living fled before them, until the last hero went into the far north with 12 companions. One by one his friends died until he stood alone. The tales say the children of the forest aided him. They forged pacts with the first men, and together they drove the darkness back. Old stories, Ned said, but we have just seen an old story rise from its own corpse and claw at our throats. Just so. Aemon's head tilted, the ghost of a nod. The realm has forgotten what it owes to the wall. It squabbles over chairs and crowns, while the true enemy gathers where no one looks. Yet not all have forgotten. You are here, Eddard Stark, when by rights you should be bones in the south. Your son rallies the north in your name. The gods, if they play at dice, throw stranger throws than most. Ned's hands tightened on his knees. I failed them, he said. In King's Landing, I misjudged Cersei, misread the game. I thought my honor would be enough. It was not. Men died because of it. My daughters, he swallowed. Sansa lives at their mercy. Arya is somewhere on the roads. Robb marches to war he should not have had to fight. If the gods had any wisdom, they would have let my head rot over the city as I deserved. Perhaps, Aemon said softly, they had another use for it. Ned looked up, surprised into a rough laugh. What use does any god have for the head of a tired old man? The same use they once had for the sword of a young one, Aemon replied. You have seen the enemy and lived. You have the trust of the Lord Commander. You have the North in your blood, and the respect of men who would spit on any other traitor who took the black. When the darkness comes, such things matter. Ned thought of Robb, of the banners unfurling in the wind at Riverrun and the Twins and the Neck. He thought of the Karstarks, the Umbers, the Manderleys, proud and prickly and fiercely loyal when given reason. He thought of the South, fat and complacent, and of dragons whispered of across the sea. "I am one man on a wall of stones," he said. "What can I do?" "Decide where to stand," Aemon said, "and who to stand with. Sometimes that is all that is asked of us. Sometimes it is everything." The fire crackled softly between them. Ned stared into the flames, seeing not the dim library but a great hall in Winterfell. His children younger, his wife smiling, his brother laughing. The past was ash, the future was ice. Between them, he sat on the wall, and the choice grew clearer by the hour. "I will not let the North be caught unawares," he said at last. "Not again. Not while I still draw breath." Aemon's blind eyes turned toward him, bright with something like approval. "Then perhaps," he said, "the dawn stands a chance." The Godswood at Castle Black was a poor cousin to Winterfell's, a cramped little copse of thin trees huddled against the cold. Yet there was a Weirwood there, old and twisted, its bark pale as bone, its leaves a dark, bleeding red. Its carved face was worn by wind and rain, features softened over centuries until it seemed more suggestion than visage. Still, when Ned knelt before it, he felt those blind wooden eyes upon him. The ground was hard beneath his knees, frost-crusted, the thin layer of snow crunching softly as he shifted. He had sunk his sword into the earth before him, hands resting on the pommel, head bowed. The air smelled of sap and cold and distant smoke. "I have broken oaths," he said, his voice a rough murmur in the stillness. "I have lied, where once I prided myself on truth. I have knelt before false kings, and watched my honor bleed out on stone steps. If you would judge me for that, do it now." The wind whispered through the branches. A leaf shook itself loose, fluttering down to land on the back of his hand, a red tear against his skin. "I chose to live when death would have been cleaner," he went on. "I chose my daughters' lives over my good name. I chose to take the black not from love of the watch, but from fear of what would happen to them if I did not. There is no nobility in that, only necessity." He drew a breath, the cold burning his lungs. "But I am here now. I have seen a dead man rise. I have felt the cold that crawls under the skin and sits in the bones. I have heard the tales of the long night from men who do not know they are telling them again. And I am a Stark of Winterfell, for whatever that is still worth." He lifted his head, looking up at the Weirwood's face. The carved eyes, half obliterated, seemed to stare back, bleeding sap that glistened in the starlight. "You made us," he said softly. "For this, did you not? The first men, the North, the Wall. All the tales lead here. If you kept me alive when I should have died, if you brought me in chains to this frozen place, then I will take that as your answer." His hands tightened on the sword. "I will stand," he vowed, "here on this wall, for as long as I am able. I will call the North back from its wars and grudges. I will make them see the threat that comes on cold feet, even if I have to drag their lords by the scruff to the top of this cursed ice to show them. I will not let my children, or their children, see a night that never ends." The words hung in the cold air, a promise cast up toward indifferent stars. Ned did not expect an answer. The old gods did not speak with voices. They spoke in the fall of leaves, in the shifting of snows, in the slow, grinding turn of fate. Yet as he knelt there, the wind rose, swirling around him, tugging at his hair and cloak. The branches above stirred, leaves whispering together like distant voices. For a heartbeat, he could almost imagine he heard his father's low rumble, his brother's laugh, Lyanna's bright, reckless shout. "Winter is coming," those remembered voices said, layered atop one another. It was the words of his house, the words he had taught his children from the cradle. Tonight, they felt less like warning and more like a summons. Ned bowed his head once more, pressing his brow to the cold hilt of his sword. "Then let it come," he said, "and let me be ready for it." When he rose, his knees ached, and the night had grown no warmer. The wall still loomed beyond the trees, a dark, jagged line against the sky. Men still quarreled in their sleep, and the realm still tore itself apart over thrones and crowns far to the south. But something had shifted within him, subtle as the turning of a leaf. He was no longer the man who had ridden south at a king's command, nor the broken prisoner in a black cell. He was Eddard Stark, brother of the Night's Watch, son of Winterfell, a man who had bent but not yet broken. He reclaimed his sword and turned back toward the looming shadow of the wall, the cold biting his cheeks, the old god's silent gaze at his back. The map of the far north was an old, battered thing, its edges curled and torn, the ink faded in places where too many fingers had traced the same lines. Yet the bones of the land still showed clear enough, the wall a thick black band, the ragged line of the frostfangs, the ghostly outline of the haunted forest stretching into white nothing. Jeor Mormont's thick finger jabbed at a point beyond the wall. "The fist of the first men," he grunted. "Good ground. High. Defensible. If we're gonna look for Benjen and see what the wildlings are running from, that's where we start." Jon's eyes followed the path Mormont traced from Castle Black, through the gate and out into the forest. Ned watched him, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his hand rested on Longclaw's pommel even here, in this cramped room that smelled of old smoke and older ale. "You mean to ride yourself?" Ned said. Mormont snorted. "I do. This is no time for an old bear to sit in his cave and let cubs do all the bleeding." "And you will take my son," Ned said. It was not quite a question. "I will take my sworn brothers," Mormont replied. "If your son is one of them, that's a matter between him and his vows." His eyes shifted, hard as river stones, to Jon. "If you're thinking to hide behind a father's skirts, Snow, best say it now." Jon's shoulders straightened. "No, my lord commander," he said. "If you ride, I ride." Ned wanted to protest, to argue, to remind them both that Jon was still young, that there were enough ghosts in the Stark crypts without seeking more. But he had seen his son stand before a dead man who refused to stay dead. He had watched him fight in Mormont's chamber with fire and steel and desperate courage. The boy he'd left at Winterfell would have spoken of glory. The man who stood here knew better. "Rangers, then," Ned said quietly. "Not a host. A sharp, small force to scout, not to fight a war we don't yet understand." "We'll take as many as we can spare," Mormont answered. "Too few and we risk never coming back. Too many, and we strip the wall of what little strength it has." He leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "But before we ride, we send word. Aemon's right about that much. The realm ought to know what's coming, even if it decides to stick its head in the snow and pretend otherwise." "The realm won't listen to you," Ned said. "Not enough of it, at least. The South has no love for the Watch. To them, you're a dumping ground for their problems. But the North..." He let his hand rest on the map, palm over the familiar shape of the land that had birthed him. "The North still remembers some old stories. They will believe if they hear it from one of their own." "You're a brother of the Watch now," Mormont reminded him. "Not Lord of Winterfell." "I am both," Ned said. The words came out before he could soften them. "Or I was. The man who wrote his name beneath the direwolf on 100 charters is the same man who took the black at the king's command. Whatever I call myself now, the North will still hear my voice beneath the noise." Jon looked between them, something like hope stirring under his wariness. "Robb is king in the North," he said. "He raised the banners for you. If he hears you're alive, that might break him," Ned said softly. "Or make him stronger." He drew a slow breath. "We will find out." He looked to Mormont. "Let Aemon and Samwell help me draft the letters. To Robb, to the great houses of the North, perhaps even to Stannis Baratheon on Dragonstone, if he still lives. He has less love for Lannisters than I do, and more claim to the Iron Throne than the boy who wears its crown." Mormont grunted. "We're not in the business of crowns, Stark. We're in the business of survival," Ned replied. "If the one helps the other, I'll not turn my back on it. He straightened, feeling the weight of his years, of his failures, like mail on his shoulders. Send your ravens, Lord Commander. If the North answers, we will not stand alone when this thing comes south. Mormont's gaze held his for a long moment, something like respect buried under layers of wariness and old habits. At last he nodded. Aye, he said, we send word, and then we ride. Jon said nothing, but his hand closed around Longclaw's hilt with a quiet, fierce certainty. Ned reached across the table and gripped his forearm, feeling the strength there, the echo of his own blood. The wall held once, he said. We will see if it can hold again. The rookery was a cacophony of wings and croaks, the air sharp with the smell of guano and old feathers. Ravens hopped from perch to perch, black eyes glittering in the lantern light, their harsh voices muttering snatches of stolen words. Samwell Tarly flinched each time one flapped too close, but his hands were deft enough as he tied fresh scrolls into thin leather tubes. Ned sat at a narrow table beneath the largest of the windows, a scrap of night sky visible beyond. The quill felt strange in his fingers. In Winterfell, he had signed more letters than he cared to remember, but most had been penned by Maester Luwin, the words shaped by careful, educated hands. Now he wrote his own, each stroke of ink feeling like a small act of defiance. To Robb Stark, King in the North and Lord of Winterfell, he murmured as the quill scratched. From Eddard Stark, his father, by the grace of gods and folly of men still living. Sam glanced up, eyes widening. Will he believe it, my lord? That you're alive? If you got a letter from a ghost, Tarly, would you? Ned asked dryly. He paused, then softened his tone. I have no answer for you, but he will listen to the tale that follows, whether he believes the hand that wrote it or not. He wrote of the wight in Mormont's chamber, the way frost had crept along stone, the burning of their dead. He wrote of Benjen's disappearance, of wildlings fleeing south, of tales around northern campfires that no longer sounded like children's scares. He wrote of the long night, of old Nan's stories transmuted into grim warnings. And between the lines, he wrote something else. The shape of his regret, the weight of his choices. I failed you, he wrote, though his lips did not speak that part aloud. I rode south when I should have stayed. I trusted men I should not have and could not protect you from the war that followed. But the gods have seen fit to give me this one more folly, the chance to warn you of a war greater than any we have known. Maester Aemon sat opposite, blind eyes turned toward the sound of the quill. The North respects plain speech, he said. Tell them what you have seen. Do not gild it. Do not soften it. Stark words for stark men. That has ever been our way, Ned replied. He finished the letter, sanded it, rolled it tight. His hand hesitated for a heartbeat before sealing it with plain black wax. There was no direwolf stamp to bite into it, no signet on his finger. His name would have to be enough. And the others? Sam asked, hovering with a length of leather thong. The letters to the Umbers, the Karstarks, the Manderleys, the Glovers. They get the same, Ned said. Shorter, perhaps, but no less stark. His mouth twitched at the old word. Tell them the dead walk. Tell them the watch has seen it with its own eyes. Tell them that if they do not turn their faces north, there may be no south left to squabble over. Sam nodded, throat bobbing. He tied the letter to the leg of a large, glossy raven, murmuring soft nonsense as he worked. The bird pecked at his sleeve, then settled. And this one? Aemon said, fingers brushing a separate scroll, its parchment finer, its wording more measured. To Dragonstone. Ned had chosen his phrases carefully there. He had not named bastards or incest outright, but he had let the truth glimmer between the lines. To Stannis Baratheon, by rights king of the Seven Kingdoms. It began. From Eddard Stark, who once rode south at your brother's command and now writes from the wall at the world's end. He spoke of treachery in King's Landing, of Joffrey's cruelty, of Cersei's cunning, of the way the South had closed its eyes to the North's warning cries. And he wrote plainly of the threat in the far cold. "If you are the man I once believed you to be," Ned had written, "then you will understand that a throne gained upon a heap of corpses is a poor prize if those corpses rise again with blue eyes and cold hands. Whatever quarrel you have with the Lannisters, whatever right you claim, you will lose all if the wall falls. Consider this, my lord, when you choose your next move. That letter may never reach him," Ned said now. "The seas are treacherous. The crow may fall. Stannis may burn it unread, for all I know. Or he may not," Aemon replied. "Our duty is to speak truth into the dark, whether the dark listens or not." Ned nodded. "Loose them then," he said to Sam. The boy shuffled to the window, heart thudding so loudly Ned could almost hear it. One by one, he opened the wicker cages and tossed the birds into the night. The ravens burst out in flurries of black wings, circling once before streaming south, tiny shapes devoured by the dark. Ned watched until they vanished. "Fly fast," he murmured, "and make them afraid." The haunted forest lived up to its name. It was not the cries of unseen creatures that earned it so, nor the way the wind moaned through the branches like distant voices, though both were true enough. It was the silence between those sounds. A deep, waiting silence that made the crunch of hooves in snow and the clink of harness sound like intrusions in some old, patient dream. Ned rode near the front of the column, cloak wrapped tight, his breath a steady plume of white. The cold here was different from the wall's high, cutting chill. It wrapped around him like a shroud, creeping under his furs, setting his bones to aching. His horse's flanks were crusted with frost where sweat had frozen. Beside him, Jon rode hunched in the saddle, eyes scanning the trees. Ghost ranged ahead, a pale shadow flitting between trunks, red eyes bright against the gloom. Behind them, Jeor Mormont rode like some black-bulked bear, his raven on his shoulder muttering in half-formed words. "Dead," the bird croaked once. "Dead, dead, dead." "Charmingly put," Mormont grumbled. "I've had more cheerful omens." They had been riding for days, moving cautiously, avoiding the wildling trails where they could, following faint tracks and older instincts. The snow lay deep in places, drifts swallowing the horses to the knee, but there were other patches where the ground showed through in ugly, frozen streaks, as if the land had been scraped bare by some great hand. They passed one such place now. A rough circle blackened and melted down to the dirt, charred bones scattered in a pattern that made Ned's skin crawl. The trees around it were dead, bark split and peeled, branches twisted. "What did this?" Jon asked under his breath. Mormont's mouth was a grim line. "We did. Or men like us. There was a wildling camp here by the looks of it. We burned it last year, when they came too close to the wall." Ned studied the bones. Some were too small to be men's. A child, then, or more than one. He thought of the wights' burning flesh in the Lord Commander's chamber, of the way it had moved even as the flames devoured it. "Burning may not be enough if what we burn can stand again," he said. "Fire keeps them down, but does it stop them rising in the first place? Or does it only change the shape of the corpse?" Jon shot him a troubled look. "You're starting to sound like old Nan," he said, but there was no mockery in it. "Old Nan has the right of it more often than not," Ned replied. He shifted in his saddle, working feeling back into his fingers. "Keep your eyes open. Listen to Ghost. If he balks, we balk." As if in answer, the dire wolf suddenly stopped dead ahead of them, head lifted, nose working the air. A low growl vibrated through his chest. The hair along his spine stood on end. "What is it, boy?" Jon murmured, heel digging into his horse's flank as he rode up. Ghost did not look at him. His gaze was fixed on a stand of trees to their right, where the shadows seemed somehow thicker, pooling around the roots like spilled ink. "Form up," Ned said, voice low but sharp. Years of command came back in an instant, worn grooves carved into his tongue by a dozen old battles. Spears forward, swords loose in the scabbards. No one runs. No one breaks. The column narrowed, men drawing tighter together. Steel whispered against leather. Breath rasped in throats. The forest watched. From the shadows came a sound like ice cracking on a winter pond. Then another. Shapes moved between the trees, pale and wrong, gliding where they should have trudged. The air grew colder, each exhalation steaming thicker until it seemed they were riding through their own ghosts. "They're here," Jon whispered. Ned's hand went to his sword. The blade felt very small in his palm. "Let them come then," he said. "We've ridden long enough to meet them." He had known, kneeling in the Godswood, that his vow would carry him into darkness. Only now did he understand how literal that darkness would be. The fist of the first men rose out of the forest like a blunt fist indeed, a rounded hill dotted with ancient stones, its slopes scabbed with old fortifications and new trenches. From its heights, on a clear day, one could see mile after mile of dark trees and white snow. On the day the dead came, there was no clarity at all. The storm rolled in at dusk, a wall of gray that swallowed the horizon. The wind went from harsh to vicious in the space of an hour, driving snow like thrown glass. Men cursed and hunched deeper into their cloaks, pulling hoods low, fingers numb on shield rims and spear shafts. "Too fast," Mormont muttered, standing on the ridge with Ned and Jon. Snow caked in his beard, his raven nowhere to be seen. Storms don't come this sudden. Ned felt it too, a wrongness in the air that had nothing to do with natural weather. The cold here was not merely absence of heat. It was an active thing, pressing against his skin, creeping under his nails. His breath froze in his beard almost as soon as it left his lungs. "I don't like it," Jon said, ghost whined, pacing, unable to keep still. The wolf's red eyes were wide, ears pinned back. "Men," Mormont bellowed. "Double the watches. Keep the fires high. I want torches lit along the whole ring." The wind seemed to swallow his words. From the swirling white below came a sound that was not the wind's. A faint, rhythmic crunching, like many boots on snow, too in time to be chance. Shapes appeared in the storm, first as darker smears against the pale, then as forms. Men at a glance, but wrong. They moved stiffly yet swiftly, heads lolling, clothes rimed with frost. Some were in black cloaks, some wore wildling furs, some wore nothing but the tatters they died in. Their eyes shone an eerie, blue-white light. "Wights," Jon breathed, and behind them, further back in the storm, something else moved. Jeor, thinner, cloaked in ice and shadow, gliding rather than walking. Ned could not see its face, but he felt its gaze like needles on his skin. "Torches," Ned shouted. "Archers fire, then fall back. Hit the ones behind if you can. Cut off their shepherds, and the flock will falter." Arrows hissed into the storm, their fletchings rhymed with frost almost as soon as they left the string. A few found marks among the blue-eyed ranks. The wights jerked and stumbled but did not fall, dragging themselves forward with broken limbs, mouths open in soundless snarls. Then the front rank hit the ring of fire. They came through as if the flames were nothing. Cloth caught, hair ignited, flesh blackened, but still they came, flailing, lunging, clawing at living throats. Steel bit into them, hacking off arms and heads, but the severed parts writhed and crawled, fingers scrabbling for purchase on the bloody snow. "Use fire," Ned roared. "Torches, burn them." He had a torch in one hand, sword in the other, flame guttering in the wind. A wight lunged at him, its face half-rotted, jaw hanging by a strip of flesh. He jammed the torch into that leering visage, feeling the heat flare as it caught. The dead man thrashed, snapping teeth inches from his nose, until he rammed his sword point up under its chin and out through the back of its skull. "Behind you!" Jon shouted. Ned spun. Another wight was climbing the inner slope, fingers digging into the frozen earth like hooks. Jon hit it from the side, Longclaw's Valyrian steel cleaving through spine and ribs in a single stroke. The top half of the corpse flopped, snarling, dragging itself forward. Ghost barreled into it, jaws closing on its throat, shaking until bones snapped. All around them, chaos. Men screamed, some in rage, some in terror. The air was full of the stink of burning flesh and the high, shrill cracks of ice. Somewhere down the line, a man shrieked, "They're coming through! They're everywhere!" Ned risked a glance outward. In the storm, he glimpsed one of the taller shapes raising an arm. The air around it shimmered. With a sound like distant thunder, the fires along a section of the ring guttered and went out, smothered by some invisible hand. In their place, the cold rushed in like a tide. "They're playing with us," Ned said, heart lurching, "testing our strength." Mormont's face was grim, eyes narrowed against the wind. "Then we show them enough to make them think twice," he growled. "But not so much we lose everything." He cupped his hands around his mouth, voice a raw bellow. "Sound the horn. Fall back to the inner ring. Torches on the ground. Burn the path behind us. We hold the hilltop or we die here." The horn's mournful call cut through the storm, 3 long blasts. Men began to pull back in ragged lines, fighting as they went, setting the snow alight behind them with pools of flaming oil. The wights came on, heedless, stumbling through fire, each step leaving ash and char. Ned fought his way backwards, shoulder to shoulder with Jon, his arm a steady ache, lungs burning. Each time his sword rose and fell, another piece of nightmare hit the snow. Felt endless, felt like drowning in ice. Yet through it all, he kept one thought like a coal in his chest. This is only a taste. Probing strike. If we cannot hold a hill, how will we hold a realm? When the storm finally pulled back, just a little, the ground around the fist was carpeted with burnt bones and charred limbs, the air thick with smoke and the reek of cooked rot. The taller shapes were gone, vanished back into the white. "We live," Mormont rasped, leaning on his sword, "but only because they let us." Ned Majan's eyes. In them he saw fear, yes, but something else as well. A hardening, a knowledge that there was no going back to what had been. "We cannot hold here," Ned said. "Not against that. We fall back to the wall. We warn them, all of them." Mormont nodded slowly. "Aye," he said, "to the wall. And then, Stark, maybe further." Dawn came grudgingly, a smear of pale gray that did little to soften the stark lines of the dead. They had dragged the bodies, those that would no longer rise, into piles and burned them, the fires still smoldering in black, greasy heaps. The living lay where they could, wrapped in cloaks, sleep more a collapse than a rest. Ned sat with his back to a stone, cloak drawn tight, hands extended toward a feeble fire. The flames licked fitfully at damp wood, casting more smoke than warmth. Mormont sat opposite, a hunched black shape, his face drawn, eyes shadowed. "You've seen war before," the Lord Commander said after a time, voice low. "Rebellion, sieges, men killing men for coin and crowns." "I have," Ned said. "This is worse," Mormont said. Ned did not argue. "Men tire," he said. "Men bleed. Men break and run. Men can be cowed and bought and talked down from madness. Whatever commands those things out there does not tire. It does not bleed in any yellow way we understand. It does not parley." Mormont grunted. "When I took the black, I thought my days of choosing between evils were done. Duty, I told myself, straight and clean. Swear the oath, hold the wall. No more damned politics." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a swirl of sparks. "Fool that I was." Ned watched the sparks rise and die in the cold air. "Duty is never straight," he said. "Not for long. Twists under you as you walk. Ask Maester Aemon. Ask any man who has had to choose which child to save." Mormont's gaze lifted, meeting his across the weak fire. "We can't hold the wall alone," he said. "We can't even hold this cursed hill without losing half our strength. We fall back, as you said. We burn what we must. We brace for the next blow. But beyond that, we need men, thousands of them. We need steel and food and fire enough to turn half the north into a pyre if we must. And you won't get that from King's Landing," Ned finished. "Not in time, if at all. The South will say we're telling ghost stories to mask our weakness," Mormont said bitterly. They'll see it as a begging bowl, nothing more. And they're not entirely wrong. We are begging. We don't have the luxury of pride. Ned thought of the letters they had sent south, borne on black wings into a world that barely remembered what the wall was for. He thought of Cersei's cold smile, of Joffrey's petulant cruelty, of small folk crushed between lords who saw them only as numbers on a ledger. The South is lost until it sees the dead with its own eyes, he said. We cannot wait for that. The North, though, the North still feels the breath of winter even in its summers. Mormont studied him, heavy brow furrowing. You mean to go back, he said, to Winterfell, to your boy and his banners. The word back struck Ned oddly. He had thought of the wall as an ending when he came, a grave of ice for an old wolf. Now the world beyond it seemed less like a lost past and more like a battlefield he had abandoned too soon. I mean to warn them myself, he said. Letters will not be enough. They may not even reach the right hands. A man they thought dead appearing in their hall, telling them this, that might be enough to shake them from their quarrels. You swore an oath, Mormont said quietly, before a heart tree, before the old gods themselves. Ned met his gaze without flinching. I swore to take no wife, father no more children, hold no lands, wear no crowns. I swore to live and die at my post. And then I promised myself to the king, and to my children, and to my people. The gods have watched me break too many oaths already. He drew a breath, the air freezing in his throat. But I will say this. If breaking one more can save the North, perhaps they will forgive me in whatever hall they keep for Oathbreakers. Silence settled between them, broken only by the crackle of the small fire and the faint, restless sounds of sleeping men. You're asking me to condone desertion, Mormont said at last, to send a brother of the Watch south without brand or rope. If word got out, it would tear the order in half. I'm asking you to send a messenger, Ned said. One who can speak in the tongues of lords and kings, who knows the names and feuds of the North, who can make them understand that this is not some wildling raid they can ignore. Call me deserter if you must. Hang my name on the wall with all the others. I will still go. A corner of Mormont's mouth twitched. Stubborn Stark, he muttered. He stared into the flames for a long time, as if reading omens there. When he looked up again, his eyes were very tired. If you go, he said, you do not go with my leave, not on paper, not in any words that can be read back to me in some hall far to the south as proof I've lost my wits. As far as the world is concerned, if you cross that gate, you are one more crow who flew. Do you understand? Ned inclined his head. I do. But between us, Mormont went on, voice dropping, I would be a blind fool to chain a useful sword to this wall when it might rally 10,000 more in the open field. The Watch needs men. If sending you gets us even a tenth of what we need, I'll gladly be called fool or traitor in some future history. He reached across the fire, extending his hand. Ned clasped it, the grip strong despite the chill in his fingers. Ride fast, Mormont said. Take a handful with you, men you trust. Tell your boy king that if he wants to keep calling himself king in the North, he'd best start acting like the North's shield again, not just its sword. I will tell him, Ned said, and if he forgets, I will remind him. As the first pale edge of the sun peered above the distant trees, the two old warriors sat in the dwindling glow of their fire, the weight of their choices settling on their shoulders like fresh snow. The gate yawned open like a wound in the wall, dark and narrow, the tunnel beyond flickering with torchlight. The great iron portcullis was raised, chains creaking. Outside, the world was a flat expanse of snow under a pale sky, the line of the forest a dark smudge at the horizon. Inside, the courtyard was busy with movement. Brothers of the Watch hauling gear, tending horses, giving the small knot of riders glances that mixed curiosity with something harder. Ned stood with his hand on the neck of a lean gray horse, feeling the animal's warmth through its shaggy winter coat. Beside him, Jon stroked Ghost's fur, fingers sinking into thick white ruff. The dire wolf pressed against his leg, agitated. as if he sensed the tug of war in his master's heart. "You could come with me," Ned said quietly. The words had been coiling inside him for days. "Leave with me. No noose would wait for you in Winterfell. You would be welcome there, and we could." "No," Jon said, almost sharply. He caught himself, offered a faint, strained smile. "You told me once that a man must finish what he starts. I took the oath. I meant it. I won't dishonor it by running when it grows hard." "Your father dishonored his," Ned said. "My father," Jon replied, "is a man who has spent his whole life trying to do right in a world that punishes it. If he must break an oath to save lives, I can live with that. But if I break mine, it will be for me, not for the realm." "I know the difference." Ned studied him, seeing both the boy he had known and the man he had become. Honor had always sat awkwardly on Ned's shoulders, a cloak cut a little too tight. On Jon, it seemed to fit more naturally, though it weighed him down just as surely. "You are more like me than you think," Ned said. "Stubborn, prone to brooding, too quick to take the blame for others' choices. And you are more like me than you admit," Jon answered, surprising a rough laugh from Ned's chest. The laughter died quickly. There was too much unsaid between them, too many questions that had hung over Jon's life like low clouds. Ned had always believed that keeping his silence about Jon's mother was the best way to protect the boy. Now, with the world cracking at the edges, he wondered if holding that secret still served any purpose. "There is something you should know," he said, the words coming slowly, as if he had to drag them up from the bottom of a well. "About your mother." Jon's hand stilled on Ghost's fur, his eyes locked on Ned's, sudden and fierce. "Is she still alive?" he asked. "Is she?" "No," Ned said gently. "She has been gone since before you could speak. She died far from here, but she was not some tavern girl I tumbled after too much ale." Jon's mouth tightened. "I never believed that," he said. "Not truly, but you let them say it. You let Lady Catelyn think it." Hurt flickered there, old and deep. "I did," Ned said. "Because I had given my word. Because sometimes a man must choose which truth to tell and which to bury." He swallowed. "Your mother was of my blood, of my house. She was precious to me. I did what I thought I had to keep you safe." "Safe from whom?" Jon asked. "From men who would have killed you for what you are," Ned said. "From kings and queens and lords who see children as pieces on a board. From the south, if I'm honest. The north was the only place I trusted to hide you." Jon's brow furrowed. "What I am? What am I, then, if not your bastard?" There it was, the moment when past and future hung in balance. Ned could feel the weight of it on his tongue. If he spoke Lyanna's name, if he spoke Rhaegar's, if he gave Jon the truth of who he was, it would change everything. Titles, claims, the way men looked at the boy who had called himself Snow all his life. "The son I raised," Ned said softly. "The boy I watched grow into a man I am proud of. That is what you are." He reached out, fingers closing around the back of Jon's neck, drawing him in until their foreheads almost touched. "If we live through what is coming, if there is still a world left to quarrel over bloodlines in, I will tell you the rest. That is a promise. But for now, let this be enough. You are not less than any man because of the name they gave you." Jon's eyes shone, though whether from anger or sorrow or some mixture of both, Ned could not tell. "I have dreamed of hearing you say those words," Jon whispered, "and of hearing the rest. Survive," Ned said. "Keep this wall standing, and you will." He let his hand drop, stepping back. "The North will look to you one day. They may not know it yet, but I do." Ghost whined, pushing his head against Jon's hip. Jon scratched behind his ear, then dropped to one knee, wrapping both arms around the wolf's neck. "Keep him safe," he murmured into white fur. "If I fall, keep him safe." Ned did not know whether Jon meant himself or the realm. Perhaps both. A horn sounded from the courtyard, a single long note. Riders departing. The men at the gate straightened, hands on winch handles. I should be the one riding, Jon said. You should stay. You've already done enough. Not yet, Ned answered. Pray I live long enough that enough is more than this. They clasped forearms, the grip strong and brief. Take care of Sam, Ned said, and of Mormont, and of yourself if there's anything left over. Take care of Robb, Jon replied, and Arya if you find her, and Sansa, and... He shook his head. All of them. Ned mounted, the saddle creaking under his weight. The horse stamped, eager to be gone. Behind him, for other riders waited, their faces set. Men of the north, mostly, who had taken the black for reasons they rarely spoke of. Men he trusted enough to take into a storm. The portcullis began to descend. The tunnel swallowed them in a wash of torchlight and echoing hooves, the weight of the wall above pressing down like a held breath. When they emerged on the southern side, the air felt warmer, but it smelled different. Less of ice, more of distant pine and old leaf mold. Ned did not look back. If he did, he feared he might turn his horse and never leave. South, he said, voice steady, to Winterfell, and if some watching god counted him Oathbreaker for it, so be it. Better a broken oath than a broken world. South of the wall, the land softened, but only by degrees. The gift stretched out in rolling, snow-draped fields and sparse copses of trees, dotted with low, sod-roofed huts and stone farmhouses crouched against the wind. Here and there, a thin line of smoke marked a hearth that still burned. In many places, there was only silence. They rode at a steady pace, fast enough to make ground, slow enough not to kill their horses. Ned kept his eyes moving, scanning not just for threats but for signs of life. The wall was a bulwark, but these lands were meant to be its breadbasket, the farms and villages that fed the Watch in better centuries. Now, too many fields lay fallow under the snow, and some houses showed only broken doors and drifted eaves. At one such place they reined in. A small hold with its stable door hanging open, the yard littered with scattered tools, a churn on its side, frozen milk spilled in a pale crust. The house door swung in the wind, thudding softly against the frame. Stay sharp, Ned said. He dismounted, boots crunching on the hard-packed snow, hand on his sword. The men behind him followed, spreading out without needing to be told. The habits of the Watch clung to them even here. Inside, the air was stale and cold. A pot hung over the hearth, its contents long since congealed into a foul-smelling lump. 2 cups sat on the table, one overturned. A wooden doll lay near the door, one painted eye scratched away. No bodies, one of the men said quietly. No blood, another observed. Wildlings? The first suggested. Ned shook his head. Wildlings don't trouble with churns and dolls. They'd take what they wanted and set the rest to burning if they were in the mood for cruelty. He stepped back outside, squinting at the faint tracks around the house. Snow had covered most of them, but he saw enough. Many boots, not all the same size, moving in haste, clustered more than spread. Refugees, he said, headed south, or to some larger holdfast. They've heard the same tales we have, in their own way. A woman watched them from the next farm they passed, standing in her doorway with a babe on her hip, a boy of 5 clinging to her skirts. Her face was lined beyond her years, cheeks chapped raw by the cold. When Ned lifted a hand in greeting, she only stared. You from the Watch? She called at last. Her voice was hoarse. Or from the Boy King? Both, Ned answered. There was no point in hiding. Word of him would out sooner or later. We ride from the wall to Winterfell. The Dead Walk, mistress. Have you seen anything? She spat into the snow. I've seen good men ride off south and not come back. I've seen food grow scarcer and lords' men take their share first. I've seen my husband cough his lungs out last winter while Maester whoever he was never came. If the dead are walking, they've got competition. Her bitterness was a shield, as much as any spear. Ned could hardly blame her for it. We will need all the North to stand together, he said. Sooner than you think. She laughed, a short, harsh sound. All the North, is it? Will that bring my man back? Will it keep my children fed? She shook her head. You protect your wall, Crow. I'll protect mine. As they rode on, one of Ned's companions muttered, Grateful lot. They have had little reason to be grateful to anyone, Ned said. We have asked much of them over the years. Taxes, sons for war, girls for service. What have we given back, save protection from threats they cannot see? They will see this one, the man said. By the time it reaches them, it'll be chewing on their bones. And then it will be too late, Ned replied. He thought of other walls, other small folk, of Lannister foragers in the Riverlands, of burned fields in the south, of the way war had a habit of making monsters of good men. The North had been spared the worst of that so far, its war mostly carried by lordly hosts far from their own farms. That would not last. As the days passed, the land slowly shifted. The signposts grew more familiar. The air smelled less of pure ice and more of pine and damp earth. They crossed frozen streams and passed under the bare arms of trees Ned had ridden by in summers long gone, when Robert's laughter had filled the air and Lyanna's absence had been a fresh ache. At night, they made small, hidden camps, fires banked low. Twice, they saw shapes moving in the distance. Bands of men trudging south, wrapped in blankets and whatever furs they could scavenge, dragging carts whose wheels squealed in protest at the cold. The refugees gave them wide berth, eyes wary. The realm is already moving, one of Ned's men said. They don't know what from, only that something is wrong. The ground feels it before the storm breaks, Ned answered. On the 6th day, as the sun struggled to show its face through a crust of cloud, a familiar smell reached him. Smoke, yes, but richer. Wood smoke and roast meat and the faint, iron tang of the hot springs that lay beneath his home. Winterfell. His heart tightened. He had not expected to see it again. He was not sure he deserved to. Almost there, he said, more to himself than to the men around him. As the walls rose into view, gray and solid against the winter sky, he felt something else too, layered atop the ache. Resolve. The boy who had left this place had become a man far to the south. The man who returned had seen the end of the world in ice and fire. He would make them understand, or he would die trying. The gates of Winterfell stood open, as they so often had in his memory, but there were more men on the walls now. Banners snapped in the wind, Grey Direwolf on Wight, of course, but also the Kraken of the Iron Islands, the flayed man of the Dreadfort, the Merman of White Harbor. War had left its sigils even here. When the guards saw the small party riding up the King's Road, they leveled spears, hands tense. Then one of them leaned forward, squinting. His jaw dropped. By the old gods, he whispered, voice carrying down. That's Lord Eddard. The word rippled along the battlements like wind through leaves. Ned heard its echoes. Eddard, Lord Stark, the Hand. In a dozen stunned voices, the spears rose as if of their own accord. No one thought to call him traitor. Not aloud. The portcullis rattled up. Ned rode through the gate into the familiar courtyard, the smell of hot springs and straw and dogs washing over him like a wave. He remembered riding here with Robert, the king's laughter booming, boys racing to see the royal party, girls peeking from behind pillars. That day had been full of possibility and dread. The future a road stretching south. Now the future ran north and it felt shorter. Stable boys rushed forward, then halted, unsure whether they should lay hands on the gray horse of a dead man. Ned dismounted slowly, boots hitting the packed earth. For a moment, the whole yard seemed to hold its breath. The great keep's doors opened. Robb came down the steps at a half-run, cloak streaming, the crown of bronze and iron he had taken in war absent from his brow. His face, older and harder than when Ned had last seen it, was twisted in something between disbelief and fear. "Father," he said. His voice broke on the second syllable, the word cracking like ice. Ned took a step forward. His knees felt strangely weak. "Robb," he said, "forgive me, my son. I seem to have made a habit of not dying when I should." Robb closed the distance in 3 strides, arms wrapping around him with the desperate, crushing force only a son who has mourned can muster. For a moment, Ned's world vanished into the feel of his boy's shoulders under his hands, the smell of wood smoke and sweat, the ragged sound of Robb's breath. "I saw your head on the walls of kings landing 100 times in my dreams," Robb choked out. "I swore to tear that city down for what they did to you." "They did enough," Ned said softly. "But not that." Behind Robb, other figures gathered. Catelyn descended the steps more slowly, her face paler than the snow, eyes wide. Her hand clutched at the rail as if she feared the ground might give way. "You're alive," she whispered. "I am," Ned said. Guilt stabbed him as her gaze flicked to the black of his cloak, the lack of any lord's saber at his side. "Not as you remember me, not as the world knows me, but enough of me remains, I hope." Catelyn stood before him, searching his face as if looking for some sign that he was a ghost in flesh. Whatever she found there made her shoulders sag. "You took the black," she said. "I did," Ned replied. "And then left it," she added, eyeing the lack of brothers at his back save the few grim men who had ridden with him. "You've broken every oath they ever thought you were too stubborn to bend." "Winter is coming," Ned said simply. "Oaths matter, so do lives. I chose the latter." Her eyes shone with tears that refused to fall. "Always you choose the path that cuts you in two," she murmured. Then, with a small, pained sound, she reached out and took his hand, pressing it to her cheek. "We will argue later," she said. "For now you are here. That is enough." Behind them, Bran emerged, thinner than Ned remembered, face changed, eyes distant and old. He was borne by Hodder's broad back, blankets wrapped around his legs. Mira and Jojen Reed hovered nearby, watchful and strange. "Father," Bran said. His voice was calm, but something in his gaze made Ned's skin prickle. "I saw you in the snow, at the wall. The ravens carried you south." "You and your dreams," Ned said gently. He reached up to touch Bran's cheek, thumb brushing the faint lines that worry and pain had etched there. "We will speak of them. I think they are more than dreams." "Theon is not here," Robb said abruptly, as if to fill the space. "Nor Sansa, nor Arya." Ned's heartbeat stumbled. "Where?" he asked. The tale spilled out in pieces as they moved inside, the courtyard abuzz, the men of the north watching their lord and his father vanish into the great keep. Theon's betrayal at Winterfell, the burning of the miller's boys, Bran and Rickon's flight and hiding, the sack of Winterfell by the Ironborn, then by Bolton men. The long, bitter road that had led Robb back to his home, crown on his head and too few loyal men at his back. And the girls. Ned pressed when they reached the great hall, its high ceilings and stone pillars sheltering them. Torches burned in sconces, banners hanging heavy from the rafters. "Sansa is still in King's Landing, as far as we know," Catelyn said. "A hostage, a pawn, a Lannister bride." The last words tasted sour to her. "Arya, we do not know. There have been rumors, sightings. None I trust." Ned closed his eyes briefly. The old guilt, never far from the surface, surged up afresh. "Then we both have lost children," he said. "You to war and treachery. I almost to my own choices." He opened his eyes. "But there is a worse loss yet to come if we do not act. One that will make all this seem a summer shadow." Robb frowned. "You speak of these dead things," he said. "These wights and others the letters spoke of. The tales we tell by the hearth." "Not tales," Ned said. "Not anymore." His voice dropped, carrying a weight that stilled the murmur in the hall. Men who had followed Robb to war, who had seen Lannister steal and Frey treachery, turned to listen. "I have seen a dead man rise," Ned said. "I have felt his hands at my throat. I have stood on a hill while blue-eyed corpses climbed through fire to drag men down and tear them apart. I have watched the storm itself bend to the will of something that is not human." Silence fell. Even the fire seemed to quiet. "The long night is not a story," Ned went on. "It is a warning, one we have ignored for too long. The enemy that comes does not care who sits on what chair. It does not care for crowns or names or old grudges. It cares only that there is life enough to kill. He looked at Robb, at Catelyn, at the lords gathered, Karstark and Umber and Manderly and Glover and more. We must turn the north from this southern war. We must recall our banners, recall our strength, and prepare to fight an enemy we cannot bargain with. And what of the Lannisters? Someone demanded. Rickard Karstark, face hard, eyes cold with the memory of dead sons. What of the blood they've spilled? You would have us forget that? Forgive it. I would have you live long enough to take any revenge at all, Ned said. Dead men have poor memories and poorer chances to settle scores. The words fell like stones into an already stirring pool. He saw the ripple of anger, of reluctance, of fear. But beneath it, he saw something else in a few faces. Understanding. They were Northmen. Winter had always lived in their bones. We will speak more, Ned said. In council, in the Godswood, in the quiet places where men decide the fate of realms. For now, let it be enough that I am here, and that I bring warning. He looked up at the tattered banners of House Stark hanging above the high seat. Once, he had sat there as unquestioned lord. Now, he stood beneath them as an exile and an oathbreaker. Yet he felt more his father's son in that moment than he had in years. Winter was coming, and he had work to do. The great hall's long tables were crowded, benches filled with men in leather and mail, cloaks of fur and wool thrown back to the heat of the fire pits. Steam rose from trenchers and cups, though little food had been served. War councils did not sit well with feasts, and this was more the former than the latter. Robb sat in the high seat, a space left deliberately empty where his crown might have rested, had he chosen to wear it. Ned stood beside him, one hand on the table, the other around a cup he had barely touched. Catelyn sat a little further down, her back straight, hands folded. Bran watched from his chair, Mira Reed at his side like some silent, green-shadowed guard. The lords of the north filled the hall. Great Jon Umber with his booming laugh muted for once, Wyman Manderly with his half-smile and shrewd eyes, the lean, fox-faced Roose Bolton sitting too still, as if carved from ice. "You have all read the letters," Ned began. His voice carried without him needing to shout. The hall knew silence for him. "You have heard the tales from the rangers who rode south with me. You have, no doubt, told yourselves that these are exaggerations, born of cold and fear." A murmur ran through the hall, some embarrassed, some defensive. "I do not blame you," Ned said. "If I had not felt the cold in my bones, if I had not seen the thing in Mormont's chamber claw its way from death, I might think the same. We are men, not children. We like our monsters at a distance, in stories, where they can be tamed with songs." He let his gaze sweep the hall, lingering on each of the great houses' faces. "But the dead do not care whether we believe in them. They will come whether we name them wights, others, or nothing at all. They will come for your small folk first, for your shepherds on the barrows and your fishermen along the stony coasts. They will come for the men who bring you your food and your news and your coin. And then they will come for you." Great Jon Umber shifted, scowling. "We've held the north against worse than tales and shadows," he rumbled. "Wildlings, Ironborn, Southron invaders with more gold than sense. You'd have us turn tail and run from some cold wind. I would have you choose your battlefield," Ned replied, "and your enemy. Every sword you swing in the Riverlands is a sword that is not on the wall when the dead reach it. Every man you lose to Lannister steel is a man who will not stand in your shield wall when the cold comes." Karstark's eyes burned. "They killed my sons," he said. "The Lannisters." The phrase, "You would tell me not to take their lives in payment." Ned met his gaze without flinching. "I would tell you that the Lannisters will still be there to hate when this is over if we live. The dead will not grant us that courtesy." A murmur of agreement rose from some corners. Manderly, sober and thoughtful. Glover, whose lands had felt the brush of Ironborn raiders and knew what it meant to lose too many men to one war when another followed. Others remained stony-faced. Robb cleared his throat. I march south for vengeance, he said. For justice. For you. He nodded at Karstark, at Umber, at the other lords whose banners had flown beside his. I took a crown I did not seek because you thrust it on my head. I led you into battles you won for me. For the North. He looked at Ned, then back at the hall. My father is right, he said. The more time I spend putting Lannister men in the ground, the more I feel that ground shifting under my feet. Winter is coming, and I am fighting last season's war. The words fell with the weight of confession. Some men shifted, uncomfortable with the idea that their battles had been misdirected. Others nodded slowly, as if thinking of empty chairs at their own tables. If we turn our backs on the South now, Bolton said softly, his voice cutting through the low noise like a knife. We leave them free to march against us when we are at our weakest. If this enemy of yours takes its time, we may find Lannister steel at our throats and blue-eyed corpses at our backs. Ned inclined his head. A fair concern, Lord Bolton. One I share. I do not propose we pretend the South vanished. I propose that we treat with those who can be treated with. Stannis Baratheon, who I have written. The Riverlords, who have more reason than we to hate the Lannisters. Even the men of the Vale, bound to us by blood. And Cersei? Someone called. Joffrey. Cersei Lannister will make no truce, Ned said. She will cling to her son's throne until it breaks beneath her. But her reach only extends so far. The neck is narrow. The moat Kaelin is strong. The North has held invaders there before. He straightened. Call back your banners, he said. Pull your levies from the riverlands. Bring your strength home. Let the South tear itself apart over its iron chair. We will watch and we will prepare. Prepare how? Manderly asked, leaning forward. You speak of this foe. How do we fight it? Steel clearly does little. Fire, perhaps. But we cannot burn the whole North. Dragonglass, Bran said suddenly. His voice was small but clear. All eyes turned to him. And Dragonfire. Bran, Catelyn murmured, half warning, half plea, but the boy's gaze was far away, as if he were seeing something beyond the hall. Samwell Tarly killed one, he said, with dragonglass. On the fist. He will write to us. He will tell us where to find more. Under the ground. In old places. His eyes focused on Ned. And dragons are coming. From the east. Fire and blood. If we stand with them, if we stand as one, we can push the night back. A hush fell. Bran's words hung in the air like breath on a cold morning. Dragons, Great Jon repeated, half mocking, half awed. Dead men that walk, old gods and children's tales. Next you'll be telling us giants walk the earth as well. They do, Bran said simply. Ned felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter seeping through the halls. Thick walls. He had always trusted Bran's dreams more than he wanted to admit. Now, hearing the conviction in his son's voice, he felt that trust solidify into certainty. The children's tales were warnings, he said. We were fools to forget that. We will need dragonglass. We will need fire. We will need every man and woman who can hold a blade or carry wood for a pyre. He let his gaze sweep the hall again. And we will need you to put aside old quarrels. The Boltons standing beside the Umbers. The Manderleys beside the Karstarks. The Starks beside. Whoever comes with those dragons. He saw resistance. He saw fear. He saw, in a few faces, excitement at the thought of such a war. War had its own kind of hunger. We are the North, he said. We have stood through winters the South calls impossible. We have held our lands when kings came and went like storms. If we stand now, united, we may give the world another dawn. If we do not, then this hall will be no more than a ruin of ice and bone in the long night to come. Slowly, one by one, men began to nod. Not all, but enough to plant the seed. I will send the ravens, Robb said. Recall the banners. Those who defy me will answer to more than my sword. Ned laid his hand briefly on his son's shoulder. Good, he said. Then let us begin. The Godswood of Winterfell was as he remembered it and not. The great Weirwood still towered over the pool, its trunk pale and smooth, its carved face watching with bleeding eyes. The hot springs still sent up mist that curled around the roots like ghosts, but the air felt different, thinner, as if too many prayers had been spoken here in too short a time, stretching the space between words. Robb stood with his cloak drawn tight, his breath steaming. The sword at his hip was not ice. It lay melted in some Lannister forge far to the south, but it hung with the familiarity of long wear. His face was older in this light, the boyishness worn away, leaving only sharp lines and tired eyes. "I used to come here to hide," he said, looking up at the Weirwood's branches. "When Bran and Arya were small and Sansa cried over torn dresses. You would find me anyway. You always did. You never hid as well as you thought," Ned said. "You stomped. Even then." Robb smiled faintly. The smile died quickly. "I thought I understood duty when I rode south," he said. "You were dead, or so I believed. The Lannisters had killed my lord, my father. Seemed simple. Ride to war. Win battles. Make the men who hurt us pay. The world is rarely simple," Ned said. He let his hand rest on the rough bark of the heart tree, feeling the faint vibration of sap beneath. "I thought the same when I rode south with Robert. Kill one mad king, put a friend on the throne, and peace would follow. Instead, we traded one set of problems for another." Robb's jaw clenched. "I made mistakes," he said. "I broke a marriage pact. I trusted the wrong men. Good men died for it. Bad men prospered." His gaze fell. "If the gods are giving me a chance to correct that by fighting this other war, I don't know if I deserve it." "Deserve has little to do with it," Ned replied. "The gods use the tools they have, not the ones they wish for. You are here. You have men who will follow you. You have a father who has seen what is coming. That is enough." He moved to stand beside Robb, both of them facing the tree. "You are king in the north," he said quietly. "Whatever crown you choose to wear or not wear, the men of these lands will look to you when the night comes. They will need a king who can be both sword and shield, and they will need to see that that king fears the right things." Robb huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. "You mean I should fear the dead more than the Lannisters?" "I mean you should fear failing the living," Ned said. "The faces at these tables, the children in these halls, the farmers in the snow. If you can keep them alive through what is coming, they will forgive you anything, even peace." Robb was silent a long moment. The only sounds were the soft splash of water in the pool and the distant howl of a wolf somewhere beyond the walls. "When this is over," Robb said at last, "if we live, what then? Do we bend the knee to whatever dragon Queen Bran dreams of? Do we send ravens south and ask the Lannisters how they fared while we were saving their hides?" Ned thought of Aemon's words, of Stannis' letter that might or might not reach him, of dragons crossing the sea on black wings. "When this is over," he said slowly, "if there is still a south and a north and something like a world between, we will have time to argue over thrones. Perhaps a great council. Perhaps something new. The old ways have not served us well." He looked up at the Weirwood's carved face. "But we cannot shape that future if we are bones in the snow. First, we survive. Then we decide." Robb nodded, jaw tight. "I will send the ravens tomorrow," he said. "Recall the levies. Offer terms to the Freys and the River Lords. Let them stew in their own betrayals while we prepare." "Good," Ned said. "And we will begin digging. The old hills, the caves, the places where Dragonglass sleeps. We will send word to the mountain clans, to the men of Skagos, to every place in the north where old stories are still told. Somewhere, someone has chipped black glass from a cliff and used it as a spearhead without knowing what it was." He could feel the weight of the future pressing in, 1,000 unknowns. Dragons, dead men, children with wolf dreams, lords with grudges. Yet here, in the quiet of the Godswood, it all narrowed to this: a father and son standing before their gods, choosing a path. "We will need Jon," Robb said softly. "We will have him," Ned replied. "One way or another." The wall will not hold him forever. He did not mean that Jon would break his oath. He meant that the world would change around them until oaths were measured not in words but in deeds. The old gods knew that better than most. Robb glanced at him. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" Ned asked. "For not staying dead," Robb said, a wry twist to his mouth. "For coming back when everyone else left. For telling me that war is not about glory but about not failing the people who live under your banners." Ned reached out, resting his hand briefly on his son's head as he had when Robb was small. "You will do better than I did," he said. "That is all any father can hope for." They stood together in the cold, listening to the whisper of the red leaves overhead and the slow, steady beat of their own hearts. Above them, the stars wheeled, distant and indifferent. Beneath their feet, the roots of the heart tree dug deep into old earth. Winter was coming. But for the first time in a long while, Eddard Stark felt that the north was beginning to wake.